Hi everyone, welcome to Best Recapped Movies channel. Today we want to speak about movie that called The Watchmen. This video contains spoiler. Please subscribe to our channel. In 1985, in an imaginary world, a man watches the news while wearing a smiley pin on his robe. The report discusses a possible nuclear war with Soviet Union, and US President Richard Nixon tries to reassure citizens about security. They also reveal a doomsday clock, permanently set at 5 minutes to midnight, indicating that war could begin at any moment. At this moment, an unknown man enters the house. They start fighting, but after exchanging punches, the assailant hurls the man in the bathrobe out the window of his high-rise. As he dies, a smiley face button pin falls next to his body. In 1940, costumed superheroes were part of society. American masked men formed the Minutes team to fight crime that the law could not eradicate. The main members of the group helped arrest criminals and win the war against Japan, but most of them were killed in the missions or arrested for breaking the law. After 20 years, a new generation of heroes called the Watchmen emerges. The team includes Dr. John Osterman, also known as Dr. Manhattan, Adrian Ozymandias Veidt, the new Night Owl, Daniel Dreiberg, as well as the new Silk Spectre named Laurie Jupiter. The team also includes Rorschach, and lastly, the comedian. In the 1980s, public opinion changed towards masked vigilantes, seeing them as a dangerous replacement for the police. Then Keen Act is passed and vigilantism is declared illegal. But Dr. Manhattan and the comedian become government agents, and Rorschach acts against injustice outside the law. Rorschach enters his house to investigate the murder of a man who had fallen. He finds out that the victim is Edward Blake, nicknamed Comedian. Also, by finding the comedian's clothes, weapons and memorabilia, he realizes that he is a former member of Minutemen and Watchmen. At this moment, police officers arrive and Rorschach is forced to fight them to escape. Daniel Dreiberg visits the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason. They talk about the history and how the Minutemen works. They talk about the comedian's death and how Nixon's current policies forbid masked vigilantes. But Rorschach is unstoppable. They see a news report about Rorschach and the cops on TV. Daniel returns home and finds Rorschach in his house eating in the kitchen. Rorschach shows Daniel the smiley face button he found near the comedian's place. They go to the Night Owl lab. Rorschach suspects that someone is killing superheroes. But Daniel says that Watchmen no longer exists and there is no reason to worry. He advises Rorschach to give up while no one knows his true identity. Rorschach refuses to do so, telling Daniel that he can never live an everyday life knowing that people struggle. As Rorschach leaves, he speculates that nuclear war is coming. Despite facing a potential war, he chooses not to compromise his morality. Sometime later, reporters interview Adrian Veidt, a rich and intelligent businessman. Adrian talks about developing renewable energy sources to end war due to scarcity of natural resources. After the interview, Daniel warns Adrian that the Watchmen may be in danger. But Adrian's main concern is nuclear war, and he believes that even a being like Dr. Manhattan cannot stop its damage. Rorschach sneaks into the US Army Rockefeller Military Research Center to warn Dr. Manhattan and Laurie. Rorschach wants Dr. Manhattan to see into the future to uncover who killed the comedian. But Manhattan claims that he can't see into the future right now due to temporal interference. This shocks Laurie and Rorschach, because they didn't know about it. Rorschach explains about someone who wants to kill the Watchmen to stop them from interfering in the war. But Manhattan dismisses him and teleports him outside. Laurie is upset that Manhattan is hiding things from her. Manhattan explains that he is working with Adrian to solve the energy crisis. He then shows Laurie a glimpse of her blocked memory, where her stepmother and father are fighting. Manhattan shows how his mind goes to dark places. For this reason, he hides secrets from her. Manhattan then says he doesn't have time to have dinner with her, so he should go with Daniel instead. Later that evening, Daniel is smitten when Laurie walks into the restaurant. They talk about past memories together. Laurie admits that John has been becoming increasingly distant from her for the past few weeks. Daniel then realizes that government agents are watching Laurie as she leaves the restaurant. Everyone goes to the comedian's funeral, but Manhattan teleports Laurie to her mother's house, where she promptly vomits in the toilet. Sally Jupiter, Laurie's mother, drinks margaritas in the afternoons and reminisces about her time as the original Silk Spectre with Minutemen. She remembers when the original Minutemen were taking a group photo in a wood-paneled club. After the photo shoot, Sally went to the billiards room to change clothes. The comedian goes to the room and approaches Sally. Sally tries to push him away, but the comedian beats her and tries to force her. At this moment, another member of the team, Hooded Justice, enters and beats up Blake. By recounting the events, Sally wants to show Blake's character to Laurie. At the cemetery, former colleagues of the comedian reminisce with him. Manhattan remembers that during the Vietnam War, he and the comedian fought the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army, allowing the United States to win. After the war ended, a Vietnamese woman approached the comedian and claimed that the comedian was the father of her child. The comedian refuses to accept responsibility for his actions, so the woman injures him in the face with a broken bottle. So the comedian kills the woman. Blake then chastises Manhattan for failing to stop him, claiming that his action shows Manhattan's lack of regard for humanity. Adrian also witnesses the burial and recalls a Watchmen meeting. He recalls the comedian as a sarcastic, misanthropic pessimist, whereas Ozymandias desired to help humanity. The comedian believed that their quest for heroism was futile when the nuclear bombs started flying. Daniel recalls when he and the comedian attempted to calm a rioting group of protesters during a police strike. The comedian gleefully fought the protesters, firing at them while the night owl was disturbed by the state of lawlessness in the country. He considered this anarchy to be the American dream. At the end, a tall man salutes the comedian and then returns to his apartment. He is Moloch, a former enemy of the Minutemen. Rorschach attacks him and demands to know why Moloch went to the funeral. Moloch explains that Eddie Blake broke into his house a week ago, drunk and crying about a kill list that included Moloch and a woman named Jenny. Still, Blake did not kill him and told him that he was more of a friend to him than his former colleagues. Laurie and John are having a private erotic moment when Laurie realizes that John has repeated himself, so she gets angry. She realizes that the actual John is working on the energy design simultaneously, angering her. John assures her that he's still focused on her, as she is the only human linking him to Earth. However, Laurie tells him that she's tired of John's focus on work. John teleports the device to Adrian's lab, but Laurie leaves again. Laurie then arrives at Daniel's house, claiming she has nowhere else to go. Daniel already has plans to meet with Hollis for their weekly session and invites her to come along. While on their way to Hollis, street thugs confront Daniel and Laurie. The former Watchman easily repels thugs. On the other hand, John goes to a TV studio for an interview. Reporters accuse Manhattan of giving cancer to many of his former colleagues. His ex-girlfriend, Janie Slater, reveals that she suffered, and publicly condemns John. John gets angry and throws everyone out of the studio. After their street brawl, Daniel and Laurie reach Hollis' house, where they watch the end of Manhattan's interview on T.V. Meanwhile, Dr. Manhattan teleports to Mars, where he recalls many jumbled events from his life, including when he met Janie in his human form. During his time with her, John was accidentally trapped in an atomic chamber by a time lock, transforming him from John Osterman, a human scientist, into Dr. Manhattan. Manhattan was gradually resurrected, first as a nervous system, then as a skeleton, and finally as a blue humanoid. President Nixon then used Manhattan's help to end the Vietnam War. He remembered how he fell in love with young Laurie and thus breaking Janie's heart. Dr. Manhattan thinks for a while and realizes that he is tired of humans and builds a large clock-like device on Mars. Back on Earth, Laurie is reprimanded by government officials for not doing her job in the physical and emotional reconciliation with Dr. Manhattan that caused him to leave Earth. Laurie recalls meeting the comedian while she was dressed as the Silk Spectre. The comedian talked to her outside, telling her that she reminded him of her mother. However, Sally stepped in and warned him to keep his distance from her daughter. President Nixon and the War Cabinet discuss recent events with the Soviet Union and planned for war. Nixon is willing to lose the East Coast in a nuclear war with the Soviets, and he orders to fuel America's bomber planes. He gives Dr. Manhattan 2 days to solve the problems, hoping that he'll be on their side. On the other hand, Lakaka and other business leaders have a meeting with Adrian regarding Dr. Manhattan's disappearance. Adrian assures them that he has the ability to unite the world. He threatens to buy them several times before kicking them out. At this moment, a delivery man arrives and starts shooting. Adrian avoids the bullets, one of which hits Lakaka between his eyes. Adrian subdues the shooter, but the assailant swallows a poison pill and dies before he can even confess. Laurie and Daniel discuss the attack over lunch. Daniel believes they're in danger and suggests Laurie move in with him for her safety. She agrees. In the crowd, Rorschach stands unmasked, watching them, assuming a relationship between the two. Rorschach later learns that the man who attempted to assassinate Adrian worked for Pyramid International, reminding him of a pyramid letter he saw in Moloch's apartment. But when he returns to Moloch's apartment, he finds that Moloch is dead. Rorschach realizes that this just happened because Moloch's cigarette is still lit. The police have surrounded the building and no Rorschach is inside. Someone has set him up for Moloch's murder, so he finds a weapon and fights his way out of the building. Despite this, Rorschach is arrested, revealing his identity worldwide as Walter Kovacs. Walter is sent to prison for the murder of Moloch. Dr. Malcolm Long, the psychiatrist, conducts a psychological evaluation on Walter where Walter recalls traumatic events from his life as he examines inkblots. She witnessed her mother kissing a man as a child, so her mother slapped her and said she regretted not aborting him. A young Walter also seriously injured much bigger kids who were taunting him. Discovering the gruesome murder of a 6-year-old girl, he is displeased with how evil society is. Walter found an axe at the crime scene and brutally chopped the culprit's head in two with multiple blows. Dr. Long leaves him, telling the police officer that he can't help them with Walter. In prison, an inmate taunts Walter on the food service line, and he responds by splashing him with boiling grease from a deep fryer, severely burning him. Walter warns all the prisoners not to disturb him. Laurie snoops around Daniel's basement and discovers the Night Owl's lab and a flying machine. She accidentally presses a button and starts a fire in the lab. Daniel arrives and extinguishes the fire, informing her that the ship's name is Archie, after Merlin's pet owl, Archimedes. He claims he inherited a large sum of money from his father, which helped him pursue Hollis' footsteps, his idol, when he was young. Daniel then puts the night vision owl goggles on Laurie, who wonders if this is how John sees the world. Daniel looks upset over this and walks upstairs. Laurie follows him and says that John sees many things, but he doesn't see her. Then she kisses Daniel, but Daniel says that they move fast in love and it's better to wait. In the prison, Big Figure, a dwarf that Rorschach arrested 15 years ago, mocks him and is now out for vengeance. Daniel has an odd dream where he and Laurie are naked on a field. Laurie pulls off their skin, revealing their superhero disguises inside. A nuclear explosion vaporizes them, ending the dream. At the night, Laurie finds Daniel staring at his night owl gear. So they decide to dress up, take Archie out, and do something silly. By scanning the police reports, they notice a building that is burning. They go to the building and rescue people. After taking the passengers to safety, Daniel puts the flyer on autopilot as he and Laurie have a lovely night in the aircraft. Simultaneously, a prison riot breaks. The dwarf's giant's men try to kill Walter, but Walter engages them and defeats them all. As Laurie and Daniel feel satisfied, they decide to free Rorschach from prison. Silk Spectre and Night Owl arrive at the prison, where a prisoner revolt happens. At the same time, Rorschach rushes to the psychiatrist's office to obtain his mask. Silk Spectre and Night Owl beats dozens of prisoners and find Rorschach. The dwarf runs into the men's bathroom to hide, so Rorschach going there and kill him. They then board Archie to leave. When they arrive at Night Owl's basement, Laurie seems bothered, but Daniel tries to comfort her. Suddenly, Dr. Manhattan appears and takes Laurie with him to Mars. At the same time, Hollis calls Sally after learning how the Night Owl and Silk Spectre rescued people from a burning building. When Hollis hangs up the phone, young thugs break into Hollis' apartment, knowing he was the original Night Owl. He fights fearlessly, reliving his glory days, but is still beaten to death. In the basement, Rorschach and Knight agree to go out in costume to search for the person who attempted to murder Adrian. They confront a pyramid employee at a bar and discover that Janie Slater, who works for the pyramid, hired the man to assassinate Adrian Veidt. As they walk out of the bar, they learn from the news that a gang killed Hollis in his apartment. The Night Owl gets nervous and brutally beats up a gang member despite not knowing who killed Hollis. At Mars, Laurie apologizes for sleeping with Daniel, and Manhattan appears unconcerned but still surprised. Laurie then asks him to save the Earth from the nuclear war, but Manhattan wonders why he would save it when he doesn't have any stake in it anymore. When she left him, he left the Earth. With Dr. Manhattan unreachable, President Nixon directs to send the bombers. Meanwhile, Rorschach and Night Owl break into Adrian's office to inform him about what they discovered at the bar. Night Owl deduces Adrian's computer password is to see his itinerary, where they discovered that Adrian's company, Veidt International, owns the pyramid. At the same time, Adrian presides over a celebration for a group of scientists as they successfully finished Manhattan's energy reactor. Unbeknownst to them, what they're drinking is poisoned. Ozymandias has them disintegrated like John Osterman's accident a split second later. Back in New York, as Rorschach keeps his journal updated, he drops it through the mail slot of the New Frontier newspaper, just in case something terrible happens to him after confronting Adrian. On Mars, Laurie is disappointed that Manhattan refuses to save the Earth and even dares him to show her what he thinks she's afraid to recall. Manhattan then reveals that her mother eventually had a romantic relationship with the comedian, despite his previous attempted abuse of her. This implies that Blake is her biological father, angering Laurie, thinking her life is just one big joke. She destroys Manhattan's machine, prompting him to create a protective field around them to shield them from the debris. Manhattan then tells her that he was wrong to underestimate the value of miracles, calling Laurie's emergence as a miracle despite unfathomable odds. Manhattan agrees to go back to Earth. Rorschach and Night Owl fly to Antarctica, where Archie freezes from the weather and crashes. Ozymandias watches Rorschach and Night Owl hiking in the snow towards Karnak on one of the dozens of televisions arrayed before him. Rorschach and Night Owl sneak in, believing Adrian is unaware of their presence. They fighting with Ozymandias, but he easily defeats both of them. Ozymandias admits having the comedian assassinated since he discovered his plans. Adrian spent $2 billion to trick Manhattan into not seeing the future and leaving Earth. He also framed Rorschach into Moloch's death and even staged his own assassination attempt to put himself above suspicion. Ozymandias plans to unite the US and the Soviet Union and prevent nuclear war by killing millions in several of the world's most populous cities to save billions. He intends to destroy the towns using devices with Dr. Manhattan's distinct energy signature. Rorschach and Night Owl try to stop him, but Ozymandias had already begun the devastation 35 minutes earlier. The military recognizes that the energy signatures are not from Soviet nuclear devices, but are of Dr. Manhattan's, placing suspicions on him. Laurie and Manhattan arrive in the devastated state of New York City. Manhattan understands that Ozymandias is behind all of this and not the Soviets. They teleport into Antarctica and confront him, but Ozymandias runs into the lab, disintegrating Manhattan. Laurie shoots Ozymandias, but he catches the bullet in his hand. A giant Dr. Manhattan appears overhead, revealing that the one disintegrated earlier was his duplicate. Despite this, Ozymandias still has the upper hand. He switches the televisions on, presenting President Nixon blaming Manhattan for the destruction. The president declares that the United States and the Soviet Union have allied against the common enemy. Dr. Manhattan realizes that Ozymandias' plan is logical and that revealing the conspiracy would only disrupt the peace and lead to nuclear annihilation. Still, Rorschach cannot remain silent and angrily turns to leave, convinced that they've committed a crime to achieve peace and that the world must be aware of it. As Manhattan completely lost his human empathy, he understands Adrian's view in killing millions of innocent people to save the planet without condoning or condemning it. Outside, in despair, Rorschach removes his mask and makes his one last attempt to talk Manhattan out of Adrian's plan.
I can change almost anything, but I can't change human nature.
When Manhattan refuses, Rorschach demands Manhattan to murder him. Manhattan eventually kills him, leaving only a bloody outline in the snow. Daniel, who was watching, screams in pain. Later on, Manhattan kisses Laurie goodbye before departing for another galaxy. Daniel returns to the building. He attacks Adrian, telling him that he has deformed humanity, but Adrian remains cold and emotionless as he takes the blows. Feeling hopeless, Daniel and Laurie leave. A few days later, Laurie tells her mother that she now knows that the comedian is her father. Laurie doesn't let Sally explain, understanding that people do strange things and it's okay not. Daniel walks in. Daniel asks Laurie on a date, to which Laurie kisses Daniel in response. Because of the world's peace, a newspaper editor in New York complains that nothing is worthwhile to print. The reporter informs Seymour, his apprentice, that he can print whatever he wants from a junk mail collection, not knowing that a vast revelation awaits them through Rorschach's journal. And here stories end. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.